rootin', tootin', and a whole lot of shootin'. And of course, the slow, drawn-out death of the Wild West. We're about to watch the legendary John Marston go from this...
You're not bad with the herd. Ranching might be your true calling, Mr. Marston. Either that, or you were a cow in a past life.
...to this... and even all the way back to this.
You're my brother. I know.
Damn, what a glow up! Red Dead Redemption and its sequel, Red Dead Redemption 2, are two masterpiece video games created by Rockstar Games. They follow a group of current and former outlaws in the early 1900s struggling to redeem themselves in a world they no longer recognize. These games take place in rich, incredibly detailed worlds filled with interesting people and compelling stories around every corner. It would literally take days to cover all of it, so we'll mainly be focusing on the story missions. First off, neither Red Dead Redemption game would even exist without the one game that everyone forgot, 2004's Red Dead Revolver. Revolver was Rockstar's first foray into the Western genre, but since it doesn't have any narrative connections to the next two games, I won't spend too long yapping about it.
Our troubles are finally over.
The game follows a bounty hunter named Red Harlow as he seeks revenge on the mercenary who killed his parents. It ends with Red getting his revenge and becoming a local hero. But Red is the strong silent type who doesn't want to be a hero, so he walks off into the sunset.
It never was about the money.
It was released to decent reviews from critics, but the two games that came after it surpassed it in almost every way, to the point that the game is barely talked about now. Now, let's get into the games that you're actually here for. Exodus in America. The year is 2010, and Rockstar, best known at this point for the GTA games, releases Red Dead Redemption. The game kicks off with our guy John Marston stepping off a ferry into the bustling town of Blackwater. John is accompanied by two federal agents named Ross and Fordham. Without any dialogue, they escort him onto a train, where John overhears two old ladies talking about how great it is that the Savage West is finally being civilized.
Yes, they've lost their land, but they've gained access to heaven.
Well, John, I think you found your first bad guys. After a long train ride of idle gossip and casual racism, John reaches the town of Armadillo. He then travels to Fort Mercer, an abandoned military outpost that is now occupied by a vicious gang. John then tells his guide that he's at Fort Mercer looking for his old friend Bill Williamson on behalf of the FBI. Who's Bill, you ask? You see, Bill used to run in an outlaw gang along with our MC here, and that's all you need to know for now. And also, it sounds like things with that gang didn't end so great. Anyway, now, the FBI has John tracking down his former outlaw gang brothers, but he probably should have come prepared with a better plan than just asking nicely.
I've come to try to save you.
John walks right up to the front gate and shouts for Bill to come out. Bill and two of his goons poke their heads out and point rifles at John from inside the fort. John then tells Bill that it's time to stop playing outlaw and asks him to surrender, but Bill just shoots him where he stands. Damn! Bill is lucky this was a cutscene. New friends, old problems. John manages to crawl back to the road and is found by Bonnie McFarland, a nice ranch woman. She brings him back to her farm and nurses him back to health. It's not just out of the kindness of her heart though, because the second John wakes up, she puts him to work paying off his medical bill of $15. They did not know how good they had it back then. Bonnie then shows John around her ranch, which serves as a home base for this chapter of the game. At night, Bonnie asks John for help exterminating rabbits and coyotes around the ranch. Yes, this is the Deadeye ability, an iconic mechanic from these games that allows you to slow down time and blow away multiple bad guys in a second. Obstacles in our path. In the next mission, Bonnie challenges John to a race where we get a full-blown horse riding tutorial. You better pay attention here, because this is what you will spend 90% of your time doing in these games. Beating Bonnie is pretty hard, and there's no reward even if you do. Man, the West really was a brutal place. This is Armadillo, USA. Bonnie then gives John a ride to Armadillo, and on the way we learn a bit more about John's backstory. Turns out our guy has a home and a farm back in the Great Plains, and a man named Uncle is currently looking after his property. He also has a wife named Abigail and a son named Jack, but it's unclear where they are.
I just know there are two theories to arguing with women, and neither one works.
Yikes. Political realities in Armadillo. In town, John meets Armadillo's lawman, Marshal Lee Johnson, and his deputy, Jonah. John asks them for help capturing Bill, but the marshal says they're stretched thin enough already. Maybe, if John does enough quests around town, the sheriff will change his tune. First up, John has to deal with a troublemaker down at the saloon. John and the marshal follow the poor bastard back to his hideout, and we finally get our first taste of outlaw killing. Because yeah, while these games are ultimately stories about redemption, they're also about slaying hundreds upon hundreds of cowboy goons. But hey, if we're judging characters by their in-game kill count, Nathan Drake should be in prison.
How long am I supposed to be in here? Huh?
Back at Bonnie's ranch, there's a mission where you have to help her herd cattle, because this is a true cowboy simulator. During this mission, John reveals that the reason he is helping the government is because the FBI is holding his family hostage. Because nothing says law and order like threatening women and children, right? John also shares that he's an orphan and he used to have a daughter, but she passed away very young. Damn, this guy needs a break. Old Swindler Blues. After a couple more chore missions of herding cows and breaking horses, John comes across a man whose carriage has been attacked by bandits. This old weirdo is Nigel West Dickens, an eccentric English salesman. John drives him to the doctor in Armadillo and fights off some goons along the way.
Thank you. You're a gentleman and a true man of honor.
John is really good at making very strange friends, it seems. Spare the rod, spoil the bandit. Next, Marshal Lee, the cop dude, asks John for some help clearing out yet another group of bandits holed up at Ridgewood Farm. On the way there, the posse finds multiple campsites that have been completely slaughtered by these bandits, as well as a new gun for John. Score! They soon reach the farm and find it to be strangely quiet. John first checks the barn and discovers a grisly scene. Blood and bodies are everywhere, and a naked body is swinging from the rafters. Yeesh! After that, a young girl who managed to survive tells the group that her family has been taken hostage by bandits inside the farmhouse. Thanks to his unexplained slow-motion shooting powers, John and the lawman clear out the house and save the hostages, then chase after the remaining bandits. At this point, the marshal figures out that this is the same gang that Bill Williamson, yeah, that guy, is now riding with. They catch up to the bandits and Bill is able to escape once again, but the lawmen successfully capture his right-hand man, Norman.
Norman here is going to help us get to Bill. Ain't you, Norman?
You shall not give false testimony, except for profit. Back in town, it looks like our strange friend Nigel has recovered enough to get back to his regular job of swindling honest folks. He asks John to act as a test subject for a demonstration of his new miracle tonic. John drinks the snake oil, and then the player has to accomplish feats of strength and accuracy to prove to the crowd that this stuff really works. Which is a lie, of course. All the drink does is refill the Deadeye meter, and for the average cowpoke who doesn't have a Deadeye meter, it probably just gives them a tummy ache. He may be trying to change his ways, but John isn't above a little bit of false advertising. The burning. Back at the ranch, Bonnie is frantically looking for her father who has gone missing. John helps her search, and they find him surrounded by dead ranchers. Oh, Papa says this is the work of rustlers, an old-timey word for animal thieves. John and Bonnie race back to the ranch to secure their livestock, but it's too late. The rustlers have set the barn on fire and locked it from the inside.
We have to find another way to get in there!
John, being the crazy son of a gun he is, climbs up onto the roof of the barn and goes inside. I think someone skipped fire safety class. John unblocks the door from the inside and manages to save the animals, and Bonnie thanks him. Hopefully, this is enough to make up for the medical bills, and we won't have to do any more cow herding missions. One can only hope. Hanging Bonnie McFarland. The next mission starts back in Marshal Lee's office, where Bonnie's father says that now Bonnie has gone missing. That's when a messenger from Bill's gang shows up and says that they have Bonnie. They're going to kill her unless the Marshal lets Norman the Outlaw go free.
What do we do?
We do as he says. You and me, Marshal.
So, the Marshal, Jonah, and John take Norman out of his cell and ride to the ghost town of Tumbleweed. But if you think Bill's gang was doing all that just to get their good friend back, you clearly don't know what kind of man Bill is. The whole thing is a stinking ambush, and Norman is immediately killed in the crossfire by his own gang. Well deserved, if you ask me. The thugs have Bonnie tied up in the gallows, but John fights his way through town and manages to save her from being hanged at the last moment. Now, she really owes him. Maybe he can get Bonnie to start doing chores for him back at his ranch.
What the hell took you so long, you stupid man?
Exhuming and other fine hobbies. John has got all the motivation he needs to assault Fort Mercer, but before that, he's got some preparations to take care of first. There's a whole stretch of missions where John helps an old coot named Seth Briers to find some buried treasure. Because what's the Wild West without the promise of hidden gold? At the end of the whole treasure hunt, the two reach a chest, and inside is a glass eye.
It's a glass eye!
Stop with the tears and help me with Williamson's gang.
Well, I mean, at least it's not empty. Seth is devastated, but he agrees to help John infiltrate Fort Mercer anyway. Can a swindler change his spots? Then, we do another couple missions for an old swindling Nigel. John helps this clown establish the time-honored tradition of selling unnecessary crap to Americans, all so that Nigel will agree to provide a stagecoach for the assault on Fort Mercer. He also provides an introduction to an alcoholic arms dealer named Irish. That's gotta be racist. A Frenchman, a Welshman, and an Irishman. When we first meet Irish, he is being drowned in a bucket by two guys named French and Welsh. These two are pissed because they think Irish stole a Gatling gun from them. Because, well, he did. Unfortunately for them, John needs that Gatling gun, so he kills both of them to save Irish's life.
Who are those fine specimens of humanity?
They was me only friends in the world, and boy am I glad to see them bastards dead.
Man, so far this game has been heavy on the dead and pretty light on the redemption. That's when we find out that actually Irish doesn't have the Gatling gun. Apparently, after Irish stole the Gatling gun from his friends, it got stolen from him by some other outlaws. So, John and Irish ride to a cabin where the gun is being held, and John fights his way inside. Naturally, there is no Gatling gun to be found, and Irish has disappeared during all the fighting. I guess sometimes you can judge a book by its cover. Man is born unto trouble. John tracks Irish down again, which probably isn't that hard since the guy is always wasted. Irish promises that this time he knows where a real Gatling gun can be found. Inside a mine. I don't trust him, but even an alcoholic Irishman is right 2 times a day. After shooting his way through a mine, John finally finds the Gatling gun. With the last piece in place, it's time for the assault on Fort Mercer. The assault on Fort Mercer. John heads to a ridge near the fort, and there he meets up with Marshal Lee, a posse of lawmen, and Nigel. Crazy old Seth has already snuck into the fort and is distracting the outlaws with some dancing.
For a minute, he will delight and amuse them. That's when he'll get us inside.
Nigel rides his stagecoach up to the front gate while John hides in the back with the Gatling gun. The gang can't resist the temptation of some delicious snake oil, and the smooth-talking Nigel rides right in. John then reveals himself and absolutely decimates the gang. After all is said and done, Bill is nowhere to be found. Almost immediately, reinforcements from Bill's gang arrive, and now it's John's turn to defend the fort. After that, the good guys interrogate a survivor who reveals that Bill has fled to Mexico to find another old member of Dutch's gang named Javier Escuela. John thanks the marshal and his men for all their help and then heads for the border with Irish. Surely nothing bad will happen to them, right? We shall be together in paradise. Now, back in these days, there was only one way to cross the border, and that was to take a raft across the San Luis River, steered by an alcoholic. It was dangerous, but they didn't know any better. Irish claims to have a lot of friends down in Mexico, but as soon as he and John start ferrying across the river, these so-called friends start shooting at them. Apparently, Irish is just as popular down south as he was back in Armadillo. The gunslinger's tragedy. Once he's made it across, John rides to the town of Chuparosa, where he is immediately confronted by some unfriendly locals.
A little taxation!
They try to steal John's hat and boots, and he shoots him dead. You know the story by now. This affair gets the attention of Landon Ricketts, an old American who used to be known as the fastest gunslinger in the West. Landon mocks John's shooting abilities and offers to show John some pointers. While doing some target practice, Landon tells John that the local government in this town is super corrupt, and there's been talk of a revolution to get rid of them. Just then, a local farmer tells Landon that a wagon carrying supplies for the town has been hijacked by banditos, so John and Landon go to take out the thugs and return the wagon. Landon is hailed as a savior of the town, while John, they kinda just ignore John. Landon Ricketts rides again. John asks around town about Javier Escuela without much luck. One guy named Emilio says that he might have heard of Javier, but his memory is fuzzy. Maybe his memory would be better if John rescued Emilio's sister, Luisa, from the crooked Colonel Allende. Everyone wants something. John and Landon take a train out to some caves where Luisa is being held. With the help of a butcher named Carlos, they blast their way into the caves and save a severely injured Luisa. Lucky in love. After that absolute bloodbath, our next mission is to play a simple game of poker with Landon. What could go wrong?
No more cards game.
Ease up there, friend.
Oh, that's why they call it a Mexican standoff. John is accused of cheating and is challenged to a duel. After winning the duel fair and square, John and Landon are attacked by the loser's friends and are drawn into yet another wild shootout. Damn, even card games weren't safe back then. The Mexican wagon train. Later, John and Landon share a drink and talk about their pasts, and John reveals the reason he left Dutch's gang all those years ago. Apparently, Dutch sorta lost his mind and ended up killing people who didn't really deserve it. Then, John got injured in a botched robbery, and the gang left him for dead.
They left me, and I left them.
Then, it's Landon's turn to drop some lore. Landon says that he spent 25 years of his life killing men, and now he's trying to do as much good as he can for the people here with whatever time he has left. John starts to think that if this old guy can find redemption after such a bloody past, maybe he can too. Finally! Some redemption in this game. Just then, Luisa runs in and tells the men that Colonel Allende has sentenced a bunch of innocent people to death. The men waste no time and ride to their rescue. John and Landon manage to hijack the prison wagon and bring the prisoners all the way to the US border. This is how you become a rebel hero. Civilization at any price. As fun as it was playing rebel for a while, John isn't really a very political guy. He's already shown us he's not afraid of helping a shady government if it means getting his family back. So, he rides to the governor's mansion where he meets Captain Vicente de Santa. At first, De Santa threatens John, but it turns out he's just kidding around and invites John in for a drink.
Welcome to Mexico, amigo!
Man, everyone is so nice in Mexico. From the captain's perspective, it's the rebels who are threatening peace in their region. He sees Colonel Allende as a brave man trying to bring order to the nation. Not sure how kidnapping girls and bringing them into caves brings order, but sure. John then asks about Javier, and De Santa tells him that all the outlaws in the area live in the hills under the leadership of Abraham Reyes. If John helps the government capture him, there's a good chance he'll find both Javier and Bill. First though, John needs to defend a train from the very rebels that he was just helping. He takes out dozens of them and manages to stop the rebels right before they could drive the train off a destroyed bridge. How long can John play both sides like this? The demon drink. Quite a bit longer, it turns out. John finally meets Colonel Allende, a self-righteous man who sees the citizens of Mexico as ungrateful animals.
Force! Force! Must be used.
if you are to have your own way.
God, I hate him. Even so, John helps the government to pillage and burn a small village, Bars, suspected of containing rebels, and then protect a small government convoy from a rebel ambush. But it gets worse. John sees De Santa kidnapping women in order for them to entertain the colonel, and he still agrees to help escort another train. After he's done, the captain stiffs John on his payment and refuses to share any information about Javier. This would make a lot more sense if we had chosen to do these missions before the ones with Landon. He was so much nicer than these bastards. My sister's keeper. Fortunately, every rebel who saw John working for the government is dead, so he's able to go back and do some missions for Luisa. Luisa's family supports the outlaw Abraham Reyes, and they believe he's going to lead a revolution against the oppressive Allende. Luisa then asks John to escort her sister Miranda to the docks, so she can stay safe until the fighting is over. Must a savior die? Later, the Mexican army captures Reyes, and John also helps Luisa break him out of a heavily armed fortress. You know, it kind of feels like John is neither a good man nor an evil one, just a guy willing to do literally anything that is asked of him. During this mission, we finally meet the leader of the Outlaws in person, and he's not quite the hero they've made him out to be. He claims that Luisa is the love of his life, but doesn't even remember her name. He also takes credit for taking out all the guards, even though we did all the work.
My people need a man such as you to help our cause.
You're making it tougher to side with the rebels, dude. Cowards die many times. In the end, John doesn't have to decide between the rebels and the government, because the choice is made for him. Captain De Santa tells John that they've captured Javier and Bill in Chuparosa. As soon as he arrives in town, though, the captain reveals that he knows John has been helping the rebels on the side, and this whole thing was a trap. The soldiers knock John out and are going to hang him. Just as he's about to be executed, Reyes and the rebels show up and start a massive shootout with the army, allowing John to escape. Captain De Santa gets away, and John decides to side with the rebels for good this time. Captain De Santa's downfall. So John helps the rebels with a couple jobs, destroying military encampments and stealing supplies. He eventually gets word that De Santa is overseeing a massacre in a nearby village, and heads out to get revenge. John gets there, kills all of the captain's men, and interrogates him for Javier's location.
Where is Javier Escuela?
De Santa gives up the info, and we get the choice to either finish off the captain ourselves or leave him for the rebels. Afterwards, John rides straight to where he thinks Javier is, only to find it's another trap. And our old friend Javi is nowhere to be found. He may be dead, but De Santa is still messing with us. The gates of El Presidio. Next, we meet back up with Reyes, and while he may be a degenerate womanizer, it at least seems like he isn't going to stab us in the back. He tells John that he just heard Javier is hiding out with the army at Fort El Presidio. So John helps the rebels to send a wagon filled with TNT straight at the fort's gate. They clear out all the soldiers, and John finally finds Javier hiding inside the barracks.
Come on, you're not gonna shoot your own brother, are you? We was family.
Yeah, we were. Then you and Dutch went crazy and family didn't mean so much.
Javier tries to appeal to John's better nature and offers to give up Bill and Dutch in exchange for his own life. Javier then pushes a pile of boxes onto John and tries to escape on horseback, but John catches him quickly. Or not quickly, depending how good you are at the game. John then takes Javier back to the border and hands him over to Agents Ross and Fordham. All that's left down here is to get Bill, who apparently is hiding out with Colonel Allende. Sounds like the perfect opportunity to kill two birds with one stone. Or, like 60 birds with a bunch of stones and bullets. An appointed time. It's finally time for the rebels to commence their final assault on the colonel's estate. After a long fight, John ends up riding after a stagecoach carrying Bill and Allende. After taking down the drivers, Allende tries to save his own skin by offering up Bill.
Take Williamson. Just let me live. I will leave the country, I promise.
But it's the end of the road for both of them. The player then has the choice to kill one of them, both of them, or neither of them. but whoever is left breathing will be shot by Reyes. Either way, they're dying. Reyes then invites John to continue working with the rebels, but he needs to get back to Blackwater. He needs to get his family back.
Good luck with the revolution. If you win power, remember why you wanted it.
Bear one another's burden. John arrives back in the States thinking his job is done, but Agent Ross tells him there is one more name on the list before John can get his family back. John complains that this wasn't the deal, but the American government is the one gang of outlaws you really can't argue with. The Bureau wants John to help bring in the big man himself, Dutch Vanderland. Ross brings John to a boat where they're holding an informant from Dutch's gang, but they are soon ambushed by Dutch's men.
Put him in the car so we can get out of here.
They narrowly escape with the informant. At home with Dutch. If you were uncomfortable with some of the questionable things John did around Mexico, well, buckle up, because it's time for him to deal with the Native Americans. Hooray! Dutch has long since fallen out with every original member of his gang, so he's started recruiting young native men. One of these is Nostos, the informant that we just rescued. With that, John, Nostos, and an insane racist scientist named Professor McDougal.
Would you like to partake of a syringe of cocaine? I've quite enough for two.
Not right this minute, no.
Travel on to a native reserve where Dutch is hiding out. After fighting his way to Dutch's camp, John spies down from a ridge with binoculars. He sees Dutch execute a lawman. Then Dutch immediately spots John and shoots him, hitting the binoculars and knocking John out. When John wakes up, he realizes he's been saved by Nostos and brought back into town. For purely scientific purposes. Professor McDougal then sets up a meeting with some of Dutch's men. He thinks they will be holding peace talks, but as you probably guessed, it's an ambush. Nostos is tragically killed by other natives who believe him to be a traitor. No! Why couldn't it have been the racist professor? The prodigal son returns. John and the professor escape back to the professor's hotel room in town. McDougal has decided that he's seen enough of the Savage West and wants to go back home east. Suddenly, one of the windows is shot out by Dutch. He calls up to John and says that he is fighting to preserve the outlaw way of life, a life that John himself used to believe in. But John knows that those days are long gone.
Only we're fighting for an idea, not just for ourselves.
John helps the professor escape by running across some rooftops, and he lives to write some more racist books. Great. Great men are not always wise. Later, Agent Ross gets word that Dutch will be coming to town to meet with a banker in an attempt to get more funding for his little outlaw band. So John and the agents post up on a rooftop and snipe Dutch's gang when they ride into town. The fight begins, leading to John and Dutch ending up in another standoff inside the bank, and Dutch has taken a bank worker hostage. Dutch taunts John by telling everyone that his wife Abigail has slept with everyone back in their old gang. Dutch then kills his hostage and escapes yet again. You've gone way too far this time, Dutch. John gets back and tries to get the federal agents to let him see his family, but they're not having it. They believe taming the West is a job worth any cost, even the lives of innocent women and children like Jack and Abigail.
Civilization may be dull, but the alternative, Mr. Marston, is hell.
Say what you will, but we now live in a perfect utopian society of law and order, so it was all worth it, right? The government is done messing around, and now they're launching a full assault on Dutch's camp. John takes position on a mounted gun on the back of an armored car, but before they can even reach the camp, the car is sent flying by an explosion. This is why I will pick horse over car any day. They're explosion-proof, unless you put a bomb on a horse. Anyway, John manages to escape from the wreckage and regroups with the agents. Then, John and the agents finally reach Dutch's camp on horseback and commence their assault. Dutch opens fire from a mounted machine gun, but John shoots out some lanterns to set the platform on fire, forcing Dutch to flee. The chase ends on a cliffside, where Dutch realizes that he has spent his whole life fighting against something that was always inevitable. No matter how much he struggled, he never stood a chance against the force of colonization.
When I'm gone, they'll just find another monster. They have to. Because they have to justify their wages.
He may be insane, but he's not wrong. Dutch finally recognizes that the time for men like him has passed, and he throws himself off the cliff. After that, Agent Ross tells John that his work is finally over. His family is waiting for him back at his ranch. The Outlaws return. John makes it back home, and we get to see a beautiful reunion between him and his love.
Where you been? Where you been?
You know where I've been, darling. You know.
Oh, okay. So, not the touching scene that I was expecting. Once he explains everything that he went through to save them, Abigail calms down a bit, and Jack is just happy to see his father alive. Unfortunately, Uncle, the old drunk he is, did a terrible job looking after the farm, and all the livestock is missing. So John and his son travel to Bonnie's ranch to buy some new cattle. On the way, Jack has a lot of questions for his dad. Jack knew Dutch and the other gang members back when he was younger, so John chooses not to tell his son that he killed them. Instead, he just hits his boy with the old, "I'll tell you when you're older." They buy the cattle, and hooray, we finally get back to our true passion, herding cows. I'm glad John is back to his honest family life, but I gotta say, it doesn't make for the most compelling gameplay. Pestilence. For the next mission, John settles back into his honest ways. He scares off crows that have been eating their corn, teaches his son to hunt, and delivers some food to Bonnie.
Thank you for saving my husband's life, and for teaching the miserable goats manners.
Also, Jack goes off on his own to hunt a bear, and we have to save him. And then, we also have to save him from wolves. Not the smartest boy in the world. Anyways, the days go by in relative peace, and John is glad his days of adventuring are squarely in the past. Unfortunately, in this world, no good deed shall go unpunished, and these peaceful days were doomed from the start. The last enemy shall be destroyed. One day, while he's talking to his son in the stables, Uncle calls for John to come outside. The US Army is riding in fast, and it's immediately clear to John that the swine Agent Ross never planned on keeping his promise. John tells his son to go inside, but Jack refuses to abandon his father, and the three men make a brave last stand on their porch. They manage to withstand the assault, but Uncle is fatally wounded and dies on the porch. Before reinforcements can arrive, John tells Abigail and Jack to escape while he holds the army off. John tells his family that he loves them and sends them out the back of the stable while he goes out the front door, and finds himself face to face with over a dozen men. No matter how good you are at this game, you're not good enough. John goes down in a hail of gunfire and dies looking up at the sky. He knows that with his death, the government will finally leave his family alone. With this final act, John may have finally achieved his redemption. We are now put in control of Jack, and after hearing the gunfire, he and Abigail turn around and go back to the ranch. There, they find John's body and grieve over the loss of a man who was only trying to make the best of a jagged, broken life for his family's sake. Jack and his mother bury John on the ranch next to Uncle. We then jump ahead 3 years. Jack, who is now 19 and looks a lot like his dad, visits John's grave, and next to it is Abigail's grave. Now, alone in the world, Jack dons his father's hat and goes after the man who took everything from him. Remember my family. Jack travels to the home of the now retired Agent Ross. He meets Ross's wife, who tells him her husband is out camping somewhere. So Jack tracks Ross down and tells him that he has come for revenge.
You sent him to do your dirty work. Then you shot him like a dog.
And I'll shoot you like one too, you little piece of trash.
But Ross isn't sorry. He says that John and all the other outlaws needed to die so the country could move on. The two face off, and Jack guns Ross down on the riverbank. Jack has avenged his father and finally closed this endless loop of violence, revenge, and redemption. What an ending! We go through the entire game struggling desperately to earn our freedom, but in the end, that was never even an option. But still, we're left with a lot of questions about John's past and what exactly led to Dutch's gang breaking up the way it did. Which brings us to October 2018. The long-awaited Red Dead Redemption 2 was released, and fans around the world were blown away by a story that not only met the high bar set by the previous game, but in many ways exceeded it. Let's get right into it. The second game takes place in 1899, 12 years prior to the events of the first game. But even 12 years back, things weren't much different. The Wild West was growing less and less wild by the day. An opening text crawl sets the scene for us. A few gangs still roamed, but they were being hunted down and destroyed. Red Dead 2's infamously long opening starts with Dutch's gang at a true low point. We've heard a lot about them, but this is our first good look at the Dutch van der Linde gang, including our friends John, Bill, Javier, and plenty more. Injured, frozen, and in retreat, the gang clings to life as they try to escape the fallout of a failed robbery in Blackwater. Dutch, looking younger, more charismatic, and visibly less insane than when we last saw him, is riding next to Hosea, a wiser, older outlaw. They're desperately looking for a place to lay low and get medical attention for a young gang member named Davy, who was injured in the robbery. Dutch has sent one of his men ahead to look for shelter, and he returns with good news. This man is none other than Arthur Morgan, our player character for this game. He's a reliable man who's deeply loyal to Dutch, and he's not afraid to get his hands dirty. Arthur's found an empty cabin, but before the gang can even settle in, they learn Davy has succumbed to his injuries. Dutch tries to keep team morale up with a speech.
Stay strong. Stay with me. We ain't done yet!
And we finally see exactly why so many people are willing to follow this man. Despite the circumstances, he's just so confident, and you can't help but want to be a part of his family. Dutch and Arthur then ride off to look for two other gang members that were sent to scout ahead. Micah Bell, a temperamental, wildly unpredictable sort of guy, and our old pal, John Marston. The pair soon run into Micah, who tells them that he's found a homestead that may have supplies. Dutch knocks on the front door to ask for help, but Micah finds a dead body in a wagon outside, and starts to think that maybe this place is less Stardew Valley and more Resident Evil. Turns out, the fellas living at this homestead are from a rival gang known as the O'Driscoll Boys. There's a long history between Dutch's gang and theirs, so it's not long before bullets are flying. And then searches the house where he finds evidence that the O'Driscoll boys recently murdered the house's previous inhabitants. Dutch's gang may be outlaws, but at least they ain't killing innocent families like these damn O'Driscolls. Arthur then interrogates the one surviving O'Driscoll to try and learn where the gang's sadistic leader, Colm O'Driscoll, is. The bastard then tells them his gang is camped nearby planning a train robbery. That's when Micah discovers a woman hiding in the cellar. She assumes that he's with the O'Driscolls who killed her husband and attacks him. Because of this, Micah knocks over a lantern and accidentally burns the entire house down.
Get on! We'll keep you safe until you figure out what you want to do.
Dutch manages to calm the woman down, and she introduces herself as Sadie Adler. The boys then return to the cabin with Sadie, leaving only death and destruction behind them. A few days later, the gang is still holed up in the cabin and John hasn't returned yet. Abigail is still worried about him and asks Arthur to go look for John. Arthur isn't the biggest fan of John, but Hosea convinces him to go search with another familiar face, Javier Escuela. And what do you know? John is being attacked by wolves and needs to be rescued. Like father, like son, I guess. Arthur and Javier save an injured John and carry him back to camp where he is helped inside by Bill Williamson. Man, it's so weird seeing these guys all buddy-buddy when we know exactly how it all ends. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a pretty solid outlaw simulator, but it's a damn good hunting simulator, and the next mission shows that off in full. The gang's camp is kept running by the efficient Susan Grimshaw, but the camp is starting to run low on food. Ms. Grimshaw and Mr. Pearson, the cook, ask Arthur to go hunting. He rides out with Charles Smith, who is my personal favorite member of Dutch's gang. Charles is half black and half Native American. He's a quiet, reserved man, but is incredibly competent at everything he does. He shows Arthur some pointers on how to hunt effectively, and the two bag a couple of deer, plus an optional bear before returning to camp.
You must be real hungry. Stay well back. Spring storms like this are the worst for animals that sleep all winter.
Later, Dutch decides that the thing this game needs to boost its spirits is a good old-fashioned raid on their rivals, the O'Driscolls. Arthur isn't sure if this is the best time to be going on the offensive, but at the end of the day, he'll do whatever Dutch tells him to. They ride out with Micah, Bill, Javier, and Lenny, a younger, easygoing gang member. On the way to the O'Driscoll camp, we learn that the feud between Dutch and Colm started years ago, when Colm killed Dutch's lover Annabelle, and Dutch killed Colm's brother in retaliation. They reach the camp and scout it out. Arthur sees Colm abusing one of his boys, who then flees the camp. So then, Dutch's men engage the O'Driscolls in a gunfight, and after emerging victorious, they find the plans for the train robbery that the O'Driscolls were gonna do. And it'd be a shame to let a good robbery go to waste, wouldn't it?
This hit'll hurt him a lot more than any bullet in the head. Especially when we rob this train, too.
On the way back, they encounter Kieran Duffy, the O'Driscoll who just ran away from camp. He tries to tell Dutch's boys that he hates the O'Driscolls now and wants to defect, but they're not the most trusting guys, so they tie him up in a barn. A few weeks go by, and finally, Dutch announces it's time for the big train robbery. Hosea tries to talk him out of it, saying he doesn't want to see any more of the gang get hurt or killed, but Dutch insists that this is exactly what they need to get out of their slump. Hosea has a good point though. This is no random cowpoke. They're fixin' to rob Leviticus Cornwall, a powerful railway tycoon. Bill is supposed to set off explosives that derail the train, but he completely fumbles the ball.
Shit! No! What? God! Oh, you have got to be kidding me! Where did you find that moron? You said it was fine. So it's my fault. Come on!
So the gang has to chase after the train on horseback. Arthur and Lenny manage to jump onto the back of the train and work their way to the front. After a long fight with the guards, Dutch's gang emerges victorious with a stack of valuable bonds. Dutch lets us decide how to deal with the remaining passengers, and again, there are no consequences to whatever we decide to do, aside from a little ding to Arthur's honor meter. When you do good or bad actions in this game, it moves your honor meter, which affects some minor story moments and the ending that you get. With spring arriving and the gang hyped after their successful robbery, we move east to a new camp called Horseshoe Overlook. It's a long, slow wagon ride, but you gotta remember, this game takes place a long time ago when fast travel hadn't been invented yet. Duh. After settling in, we are introduced to one of the more colorful characters in Dutch's gang, the alcoholic Reverend Swanson. The good Reverend is absolutely wasted in broad daylight and is getting into trouble at a nearby train station. Swanson has gotten himself in debt at the poker table, so Arthur has to play a few hands of poker for him, then protect him from some random dude he insulted, and finally save him when he gets a foot stuck in some railroad tracks.
Get your foot out of here! Twist your leg, you drunken bastard! Got it! Come on!
Ugh. Another game, another alcoholic character who is a major pain in the ass. Later, Arthur heads to a saloon in the town of Valentine for supplies, along with good ol' uncle, and 3 women from the camp, Karen, Tilly, and Mary Beth. In town, a man recognizes Arthur from the failed robbery in Blackwater. The guy is scared Arthur will hurt him, so he tries to ride away, but Arthur steals a horse and chases after him. Eventually, the dude rides his horse right up to a cliff and is thrown off. We're given the chance to save him or not. But personally, I don't see Arthur as the kind of man who would stomp on an innocent man's fingers while he's holding on for his life. I saved him, warned him to never tell anyone what he saw in Blackwater, and sent him on his way.
I never saw you. Not now, not never.
Next, Arthur heads to the saloon in Valentine. Javier and Charles are chatting up a couple women who Arthur immediately scares away.
How much you cost, anyway?
Well, ain't that a nice way to talk to a lady?
Oh, I didn't know I was talking to a lady.
Yeah, I love the guy, but Arthur's probably got less game than anyone in this gang. Well, except Bill. And speak of the devil, Bill walks in and immediately starts a bar fight. See, while Javier and Dutch were men turned sour by time and tragedy, Bill was just kinda always an asshole. A huge brawl breaks out until Dutch arrives and calms everything down. He's with an old friend of the gang named Josiah Trelawney, and Trelawney has news about a member of the gang who went missing after the failed robbery, Sean Maguire, a cheerful Irish chap, and he's being held by bounty hunters in Blackwater. Dutch tells his men to go rescue Sean ASAP. So Arthur, Javier, and Charles head out to rescue Sean before he can be transported to a federal prison. They fight through a group of bounty hunters known as the Ike Skeldings Boys. Damn, everyone had boys back then. The mission is a success, and that night at camp there is a big party to celebrate Sean's return. Later, Dutch and Bill decide to have some fun with Kieran, the former O'Driscoll that they've had tied to a tree for weeks now. They threaten him with ball torture until Kieran finally gives up Colm's location. Kieran then leads Arthur, Bill, and John to the O'Driscoll safe house. After a gunfight breaks out, Kieran saves Arthur's life by taking out an O'Driscoll.
You alright?
Sure, thank you.
Dutch's men decide that Kieran has earned his freedom, but Kieran asks if he can become a full-fledged member of Dutch's gang instead, pledging loyalty to the guys that almost castrated you. Now that takes balls. Back at the camp, Arthur receives a letter from an old flame of his named Mary Linton. Arthur and Mary used to be engaged, but they broke up because Arthur refused to leave behind his outlaw lifestyle. Anyway, Arthur goes to visit Mary and...
Hello, Arthur.
Damn! Guess he has more game than I gave him credit for! Afterwards, Mary asks Arthur to check on her brother Jamie, who recently joined a religious cult called the Shalonians. Arthur rides out to their camp, and I'm not sure what exactly I was expecting, but it's just 5 dudes wearing smocks. Jamie refuses to speak with Arthur and rides away, forcing Arthur to chase after him. Jamie eventually falls off his horse and threatens to unalive himself, but Arthur shoots the revolver right out of his hand. Then Jamie breaks down crying, and Arthur brings him back to Mary. Next, Dutch gets a word that the troublemaking Micah has been arrested for murder in the town of Strawberry, and he's gonna be hanged by the sheriff. Lenny, who is very close to Micah, is deeply upset about this news, and Dutch tells Arthur to take Lenny out for a drink to calm him down. The two of them proceed to have a wild night.
Why ain't you never married?
A lot of dancing, brawling, and stumbling around later, the mission either ends with Arthur waking up the next morning in jail or back at camp, depending on just how rowdy the player gets during the mission. After his hangover has worn off, Arthur travels to Strawberry to try and break Micah out of prison. He first tries a straightforward approach and talks to the town's sheriff while pretending to be a bounty hunter who needs to borrow Micah for information. That doesn't work, and Arthur thinks about leaving Micah there since he only ever brings trouble to the gang. But in the end, he knows he can't leave a man behind, so he uses a steam-powered winch to rip the window out to Micah's cell and break him out. Arthur wants to get out of town, but Micah still has some unfinished business. Micah then kills his cellmate, the sheriff, a guy who stole his guns, that guy's wife, and about half the town of Strawberry just for good measure. Arthur yells at Micah for his recklessness, but the violent bastard just sorta half apologizes and says that, since they're all sons of Dutch, they need to have each other's backs no matter what. Easy for him to say, he's not the one who just got dragged into massacring a town with an adorable name. Back at the camp, Abigail asks Arthur to take little Jack out fishing. While they were just trying to enjoy the day and catch some fish, Arthur is approached by 2 Pinkertons, private security agents hired by the US government. They introduce themselves as agents Milton and Ross. Well, this certainly isn't the last time that Jack and Ross will meet on a riverbank. The agents tell Arthur that they know his gang robbed Cornwall's train, but they're only interested in arresting Dutch. Arthur plays dumb, but Agent Milton taunts him by saying the Pinkertons killed one of his friends back in Blackwater.
You people venerate savagery, and you will die. Savagely. All of you.
Oh, we're all gonna die, Agent.
Arthur is infuriated, but he's not about to start anything in front of little Jack. The agents then make some threats and leave. So they were always assholes. After another successful train robbery, Arthur helps John with a much less exciting scheme to steal sheep. During this mission, John begins to express his doubts about following Dutch. John is starting to think that soon the whole gang will have to accept that their way of life is no longer possible or die. After selling the stolen sheep from the train at auction, Arthur and Dutch celebrate at the saloon.
Where have you been?
Working. Marston's thing.
Just then, Leviticus Cornwall himself shows up with an army of private guards. He's holding John hostage and demands that Dutch give himself up. Dutch pretends to surrender, and Arthur takes out the guards while Dutch is distracting them. They manage to free John, but after this encounter, Dutch claims that their camp in Horseshoe Overlook isn't safe anymore. So the gang moves camp to Dewberry Creek and brings another chapter of this game to a close. Once they've settled into Dewberry Creek, Arthur goes on a fishing trip with Dutch and Hosea. They're quickly distracted when they see a prison transport from the town of Rhodes carrying Dutch's friend Trelawney. While Dutch is asking the lawman what Trelawney was arrested for, another prisoner escapes from the wagon and climbs on a passing train. Seeing this, Dutch offers to have Arthur go catch the escaped convict if the lawman let Trelawney go. The man in charge, Sheriff Gray, agrees. And does Arthur get a say in any of this?
Take Archibald with you. Just what I signed up for. Come on, big guy.
No, he does not. Arthur has to jump onto a moving train for probably the 10th time so far this game and catch the crook. Later, Arthur meets up with Sadie, the woman they took in after her husband was killed by the O'Driscolls. She's upset that the women in this camp are pretty much only allowed to help with the cooking and cleaning, so Arthur takes her into town. Arthur and Sadie bond during the trip, and Sadie wants to rob the town's general store to prove herself. But Arthur convinces her that that would only force the gang to move camp again. On the way back, they are attacked by members of the Lemoyne Raiders, a gang made up of veterans from the Confederacy who refuse to accept that they lost the Civil War. They also refuse to accept that they suck. Anyway, Sadie proves that she can handle a gun, they win, and Arthur returns to camp with a newfound respect for Ms. Adler. After their little stunt chasing down an escaped convict, Sheriff Gray decides that these guys are truly upstanding gentlemen and officially deputizes Dutch, Bill, and Arthur. It makes a lot more sense when we learn that Sheriff Gray is pretty incompetent and more than a bit corrupt. He mostly uses his position as sheriff to go after his family's rivals, the Braithwaites. The sheriff asks Dutch and his boys to help raid a distillery where the Braithwaites are making illegal moonshine. Arthur blows up the distillery with dynamite, and the gang makes off with a crate of stolen booze. On the way back, Dutch starts to come up with a plan to play both sides of this blood rivalry between the two southern families and come out on top. Arthur says that Dutch is starting to sound more like his old crafty self rather than the madman he's been lately. We'll see how long that lasts though. After a wagon robbery gone wrong, Dutch asks Arthur to go see what he can find out about the Gray family by investigating their family home of Caliga Hall. So Arthur rides to the huge mansion and is allowed in by introducing himself as a friend of the sheriff. There, Arthur meets Beau Gray, a young man who is madly in love with the lovely Penelope Braithwaite, and unafraid to tell this to a complete stranger for some reason.
Don't worry, your secret's safe with me.
What secret?
I got a secret of my own.
Are you secretly normal?
Excuse me?
Never mind.
Beau knows their families would never approve of their relationship, since his parents want him to keep things in the family by marrying his own cousin. Ew. But Beau isn't interested in marrying his cousin, and asks Arthur to deliver a love letter to Penelope. Arthur then rides to Braithwaite Manor, a mansion even bigger than the Grays. He sneaks over to a gazebo where Penelope is reading and delivers the letter. She reads it and gives Arthur a letter of her own to bring back to Beau. 90% of this game is truly just doing chores for other people. Arthur heads back to the Grays, and after reading the letter, Beau becomes concerned for Penelope's safety. She plans on joining a protest for women's voting rights, which for some reason was seen as a huge threat by these insecure men. Arthur rides to meet the women before they can start the protest, and he agrees to drive their wagon and make sure nobody hurts them. To be clear, Arthur is only doing this because Beau is paying him, but still, I'd give Arthur his feminist badge for this one. Next, Arthur helps Hosea with a scheme to sell the Braithwaites' own moonshine back to them. Ballsy! They ride together to Braithwaite Manor, where they meet the family's tough-as-nails matriarch, Catherine Braithwaite. Hosea explains to her that he happened to find the moonshine and would be happy to return it for a little finder's fee. But Catherine doesn't buy it, and reveals that she already knows they were the ones who stole it with Sheriff Gray. Fortunately, she isn't mad, because she smells a way to get back at the Grays. She asks Hosea and Arthur to go to a saloon owned by the Grays and give all the moonshine away for free in order to draw business away from her rivals. Ooh, that's smart. so Hosea and Arthur head to the saloon and pretend to be brothers named Milton and Fenton, while giving out as much booze as these cowboys can drink. Eventually, members of the Lemoyne Raiders show up, and they're pissed because they were supposed to be the original buyers of all this moonshine. A gunfight breaks out, and our boys narrowly escape. Back at the camp, Arthur tells Dutch he's starting to have more doubts about messing with a blood feud. After all, they're already in a lot of trouble with the law and one of the country's richest men. Arthur also suspects that Dutch is only doing this because his father was killed by Confederates during the Civil War, and now Dutch has a deep hatred for Southerners. Dutch assures Arthur that this is what's best for the gang and they can only be safe from the government if they get hella money. And Arthur doesn't mention that there's another option, which would be to simply turn Dutch into the authorities, but he's just too loyal. The next couple missions are all about helping the Greys get revenge on the Braithwaites, helping the Braithwaites get back at the Greys, and basically just turning up the heat on this whole mess until things are about to explode. First, Arthur and Lenny raid a weapons cache being held by the Lemoyne Raiders. Then, Arthur, John, and Javier steal a group of prized horses from the Braithwaites. Finally, Arthur and Sean burn down the Greys' tobacco fields. Damn! They're really trying to piss everyone off, huh? Also, Bill asks Arthur to help him and Karen rob the bank back in Valentine since they don't live near there anymore. Cool! One day in camp, Dutch asks Arthur and Charles to go check on his friend Trelawney. They soon find out that he's been kidnapped by bounty hunters who want information on Dutch's gang. Arthur and Charles are able to defeat all the bounty hunters and rescue Trelawney, and he decides to chill in camp with them until the heat dies down. Wanting to earn his keep there, Trelawney then takes Arthur to rob a stagecoach. On the way there, Trelawney warns Arthur that as the gang continues to rise in notoriety, their chances of ending up dead is increasing as well. Arthur just says that he has faith in Dutch and the plan, and we all know how well that works out for John Marston. After their successful robbery, Arthur returns to camp, where Mr. Pearson has a message from some O'Driscolls he met in town.
I met a couple of the O'Driscoll boys on the road in the town. Things were about to get ugly, but you know how I am in a fight, huh? Like a corner tiger.
Apparently, they want to arrange a peaceful meeting between Dutch and Colm to end the rivalry. Everyone smells a trap immediately, everyone except Micah, that is. He thinks this is such a great idea and manages to convince Dutch that it's worth looking into. If there's a single moment Dutch went wrong, it's the moment he started listening to Micah. Arthur goes along with them as a bodyguard and takes the high ground on a ridge to watch over their meeting. Dutch sincerely tries to make amends, but Colm just laughs at him. It turns out the whole thing was a trap, just not for Dutch. That's when some O'Driscolls ambush Arthur up on the ridge and knock him unconscious. Arthur wakes up wounded and hanging upside down, and he's being tortured. Colm tells Arthur that he's just the bait in a trap they've set for Dutch. After Colm leaves, Arthur manages to free himself and escape the O'Driscoll camp. He almost makes it back to his camp, but he passes out. Luckily, he's found by Dutch, Karen, and Mary Beth. They bring him inside, and Arthur spends the next few weeks recovering from his injuries. Once Arthur is well enough, the Greys have another job for Dutch's boys. Arthur meets up in Rhodes with Micah, Sean, and Bill. Arthur and Sean are suspicious that this could be a trap, and they are proven to be tragically right. Poor Sean is killed immediately in an ambush, and the others scramble for cover. They have got to stop walking right into these obvious traps. Bill is captured by Sheriff Gray, leaving Arthur and Micah to fight off the Greys. They emerge victorious, thanks once again to Arthur's time-slowing powers. Arthur shoots Sheriff Gray to save Bill. Arthur then tears into the other two men for their carelessness, leading to Sean's death, and tells Bill to give the boy a proper burial. Upon returning to camp, things don't get any better. Little Jack has been kidnapped, and Dutch thinks it was Catherine Braithwaite getting revenge for their prized horses. Yeah, prized horses. A human child? That sounds equal to me. Anyway, all the men in the camp immediately ride to Braithwaite Manor to confront them. Predictably, it turns into a gigantic shootout the second they get there. Arthur fights his way inside and finds Catherine hiding in a room with 2 of her sons. Catherine's family is destroyed right in front of her, and when she refuses to give up Jack's location, Dutch drags her out of the mansion and forces her to watch it burn to the ground. Catherine finally reveals that she gave Jack to an Italian gangster named Angelo Bronte.
My sons gave him to Angelo Bronte. So my guess is Saint-Denis.
They then let her go, and she runs back inside the burning mansion to burn with the rest of her family. Damn! The next morning, Hosea is unsuccessfully trying to reassure John that they'll get Jack back. Suddenly, agents Milton and Ross walk right into the camp. They tell everyone that the days of the outlaw are over. Milton says that despite claiming to be fighting for a way of life, Dutch is ultimately just a killer. The agents offer everyone there a deal. If they give up Dutch, they will be allowed to leave in peace. The gang unanimously rejects the deal and stands behind their leader. Dutch may not have made the best decisions as of late, but they're not about to sell him out to these jerks. The agents are threatened out of the camp, but Dutch knows they'll have to relocate somewhere hidden and quick. So Arthur and John travel to a Lemoyne Raider stronghold deep in the swamp and take out the men there to claim it as their new camp. Along the way, John continues to doubt Butch's leadership, and you really can't blame him. Everyone starts setting up their new digs, while Arthur and Dutch ride to the town of Saint-Denis to look for Jack. Saint-Denis is a major settlement, the largest anywhere in the Red Dead franchise. Paved streets, uniformed officers, public transportation. It's like a real town. Arthur asks around the local bar if anyone knows where Angelo Bronte lives, but everyone is too scared of the local crime boss to give up any info. Soon, Arthur is robbed by a child pickpocket named Cleet and starts chasing the boy around the streets. Arthur is led right into the lair of these street urchins, but the leader of this little gang tells Arthur where Bronte lives.
Now, get out of here.
Hey, thanks kid! Next, Arthur meets Dutch and John outside of Bronte's mansion. Dutch decides the best approach here is the direct one, and the 3 men walk right into Bronte's lavish home, which is surrounded by armed guards. It's a bold move, but Dutch wins Bronte over quickly with that classic Dutch charm. Before he can return Jack though, he'll need our boys to deal with some grave robbers at a nearby cemetery. Arthur and John go deal with that while Dutch gabs with his new bestie. Our 2 MCs take out the robber and evade some lawmen, and after that, things work out surprisingly well. Bronte hands Jack over and the boy is completely unharmed. In fact, he had a grand old time living in this mansion. Also, Bronte invites Dutch and his men to a party at the mayor's house. Looks like Dutch is starting to move up in this society he claims to hate. Once they get back to camp, Abigail is overjoyed to have her son back, and the gang has another party. Arthur can't believe that Dutch is actually interested in a high society party. But Dutch assures his men that it's just another opportunity to find rich people to rob. But really, Dutch can't help but be impressed by a man like Angelo, who manages to be an outlaw while still carving out a place for himself in modern society. So the boys put on their best suits and head to the party, where there is no shortage of opportunities for robbery.
We are going to need some money.
Money, yes, of course.
They walk away with plans for a high-stakes riverboat heist, a bank job, and a cash-heavy trolley station. And they say crime doesn't pay. The next couple missions don't have much to do with our main story. Leviticus Cornwall is trying to steal some land from the Native Americans, so Arthur helps a man named Eagleflies to steal some documents proving that Cornwall is doing something illegal. Also, Tilly Jackson gets kidnapped by a new gang called the Foreman Brothers, and Arthur has to go save her. What the hell would they do without us? Back at camp, Dutch is planning to rob the trolley station when a terrifying sight rides in. It's Kieran minus his head. He disappeared a few days ago after Jack's return party, and it looks like the O'Driscolls got their revenge on Kieran for switching sides. Arthur hears Sadie screaming at one point and rushes to save her, but she doesn't need it. He finds her single-handedly taking out 3 O'Driscolls with just a knife. Go off, girl!
We need you in the house, Mrs. Adler!
Oh, no, they don't!
The O'Driscolls eventually retreat, and the gang mourns Kieran's death. He may not have been with them for long, but they all liked him, especially Mary Beth. She had fallen in love with the boy. They give him a proper burial, and everyone collectively swears revenge on Colm. As their cash reserves grow, Dutch reveals that his new plan is for the gang to escape to either Australia or Tahiti once they have enough money to book passage. Everyone knows Australia is the new Wild West after all. Later, Arthur, Dutch, and Lenny rob the trolley station, which Bronte promised would be flush with cash. However, when they get there, they find only a measly few dollars and realize they've been set up by the sleazy gangster. Another trap! Who could have seen that coming? The station is surrounded by police, and the 3 are barely able to escape using the trolley, which derails in the middle of the street. Dutch is furious that his new friend tricked him, and says that the only chance they have left at getting enough money for their plan is the Saint-Denis Bank. With the way things have been going, I don't exactly have the highest hopes. Before they hit the bank though, Dutch really wants to murder Angelo Bronte. Hosea and Arthur try to convince him that this is a terrible idea, and that Dutch's revenge quests have been causing a lot of trouble lately. Dutch insists that taking out Bronte will cause enough chaos that they'll be able to rob the Saint-Denis Bank without much trouble. It'll be easy. So, Arthur and Dutch go to collect a boat that they can use to approach Bronte's mansion from the back. On the way there, Dutch says that he feels like all his men are losing faith in him, and that Micah is the only loyal one left. But when Micah is the only person still listening to you, that's a sign that it's time for some major self-reflection. Arthur insists that he still believes in Dutch, but you can tell things are reaching a breaking point. Fortunately, nothing brings 2 men together like fighting a monstrous alligator.
It's coming right for us!
Damn, that is a tough gator! Next, Dutch, Arthur, John, Bill, and Lenny launch their assault on Bronte's mansion. They take their new boat to the back of the house and sneak through the yard. Of course, it turns into a gigantic shootout again until they find Bronte hiding upstairs. They knock the gangster out and take him back to the boat. Bronte desperately offers all of the men a huge cash reward if they turn on Dutch.
$1,000 to the man who kills him and sets me free.
But we know how pointless it is trying to bribe these guys. Dutch is enraged that Bronte thinks of himself as so much better than Dutch, so the gang drowns Bronte and feeds him to an alligator. This shocks both Arthur and John, who are realizing that Dutch is pretty much completely controlled by emotion at this point. Despite their doubts, they're still willing to go through with one last job that will supposedly set the gang up for life. Lemoyne National Bank. Hosea starts a fire in town to cause a distraction, while the rest of the boys hit the bank. They get the cash from the vault, and things are going great, until the Pinkertons arrive with Hosea taken hostage. By this point, Agent Milton knows how loyal Dutch's men are, and his new strategy is to just rage bait Dutch as much as possible. So, Milton kills Hosea in the street, sending Dutch into a rage. A major gunfight follows. Lenny gets killed, John is captured, and the rest of the gang narrowly escape. The heat on them has finally gotten too hot. So later that night, Dutch, Arthur, Micah, Bill, and Javier sneak aboard a boat and head for Cuba. Even after all this, God still isn't ready to give them a break just yet. The boat is hit by a massive storm, a fire breaks out, and all the men are forced to jump ship, losing the money they took from the bank. Arthur washes ashore on the tropical island of Guarma and soon reunites with the other men who all survived the wreck. Now, the Guarma chapter is one that a lot of players will rush through since you're cut off from the game's main map. And there's not a whole lot to do here besides story missions. It also doesn't have much to do with the game's main story, so we won't spend too much time here either. The Caribbean islands is home to locals who are enslaved by the Cuban military and forced to work on sugar plantations. Dutch and his gang get caught in the middle of a rebellion by the locals, and unlike when John went to Mexico in the first game, they side with the rebels right from the jump. The chapter ends with the gang helping the rebels sink a Cuban warship. The men then make their escape back to America aboard a fishing vessel. During their trip back, Dutch says that his plan hasn't changed a bit. They just need to find one last big job and escape the country as a family. You'd think their experience in Guarma would have taught Dutch that his dream of finding a perfect paradise isn't all that realistic. But hey, the guy is a dreamer at heart. Once they reach land, Arthur heads back to their most recent campsite to look for any leads on where the rest of the gang might have gone. There, he finds a letter from Sadie telling him they've gone to the small swamp town of Lackey. After fighting his way through some Pinkertons, Arthur rides there and reunites with his friends.
Arthur! Arthur's here!
Oh, Arthur! Oh, you're alive!
Just about.
Come inside. Come on, it's raining.
Apparently, while the men were gone enjoying their tropical vacation, Sadie really stepped up and became a leader in Dutch's absence. She even managed to steal Hosea and Lenny's bodies from the morgue in order to give them proper burials. Sounds to me like she should take this position full time. Just as they're reuniting though, Agent Milton shows up again, this time with a mounted machine gun. Sadie was prepared for this though, and she leads Arthur through a trapdoor to go around and flank the Pinkertons. Using the element of surprise, Arthur manages to take over the machine gun and drive off the agents.
What do we do, Dutch? Clearly we need to leave.
Afterwards, Abigail reminds everyone that John is in jail and they need to rescue him as soon as possible. But Dutch doesn't seem interested in rescuing John. He knows that John was losing more faith in him than anyone. So, Abigail turns to two actually competent members of the gang instead, Arthur and Sadie, and they agree to help free John. Also, Arthur is starting to cough quite a bit, but he insists that it's nothing. Later, Arthur travels to meet up with Sadie near John's prison, but on the way there, he is overcome by a coughing fit and passes out. He wakes up in a doctor's office where sadly, Arthur is diagnosed with tuberculosis and is told that he doesn't have much time left. This downer of a mission is immediately followed by one of the craziest ones in the whole game. Arthur takes a ride in a hot air balloon to scout out the prison where John is being held on Sisika Island. While in the air, he spots Sadie being chased by some O'Driscoll boys and provides air support. Then, the balloon operator is shot and falls out of the basket, leaving a confused Arthur to pilot the balloon himself. He throws a rope to Sadie and pulls her up into the basket, but they soon run out of fuel and crash on a riverbank.
Hold on!
Probably not what I would do right after getting a death sentence at the doctor's office, but Arthur is just that guy. After this time, it's time to move camps one last time. Arthur and Charles go to Beaver Hollow and clear out members of the Murphy Brood, a terrifying clan of inbred hill people. Arthur rescues Meredith, a girl who had been kidnapped by the Murphys, and takes her home while the others set up the crew camp. When he gets back, Dutch's lover Molly appears. We haven't even mentioned Molly so far because she hasn't really done anything, but she's basically Dutch's girlfriend who he's been ignoring this entire time. She'd been missing for a little while, but now she's back and completely wasted. She drunkenly boasts to everyone that she ratted out Dutch to the authorities and that she was the reason Agent Milton was waiting for them outside the bank job in St. Denis.
About the bank robbery, and I wanted them to kill you.
You did what?
Dutch draws his gun, but Arthur tries to talk him out of killing a woman in the middle of camp. He doesn't have to though, because the choice is made by Ms. Grimshaw, who shoots Molly in the stomach. Afterwards, Molly is the one member of the gang so far that they neglect to give a proper burial. Even with everything that's happened, betrayal is still one thing this gang can't take seriously. Since they don't have Dutch's blessing, Arthur and Sadie have to break out John all on their own. They row themselves to Sisika Island and sneakily take out the guards patrolling the grounds. Eventually, Arthur takes a guard hostage and demands that they release John. They do, but immediately open fire on the three outlaws who barely escape the island. On their way back, Arthur and John agree that Dutch is not the same man he was when they started following him. This is confirmed when they get back to camp, and Dutch is not pleased to see John at all. Dutch says that he had a plan to get John out eventually, but now the law will be looking extra hard for all of them.
I had a goddamn plan!
Next, Dutch asks Arthur to come meet him and Micah in the town of Ansburg. Dutch says they are going to meet Leviticus Cornwall and pay him a simple social call. I have my doubts. Hosea was literally the last voice of reason that Dutch was willing to listen to, and with him gone, he's starting to turn to Micah for advice. He'd be better off asking an O'Driscoll. The trio then head to a harbor where Cornwall's fancy yacht docks, and the big man himself gets off, along with agents Milton and Ross. Cornwall is pissed that the agents haven't captured Dutch yet. Lucky for him, I don't think they'll have to wait long. After the agents leave, Dutch reveals himself to Cornwall and tells the tycoon that he represents everything going wrong with America.
You kill, I kill. You rob, I rob. Only difference I can see is I choose whom I kill and rob, and you destroy everything in your path.
Dutch says that if Cornwall gives him $10,000 and his yacht, they will let him live. Cornwall just laughs, but he should know by now that Dutch doesn't make empty promises. Dutch shoots Cornwall in the chest, and a shootout begins. Arthur and Dutch escape and meet back up with Micah, who has discovered the location of a large cache of dynamite. Looks like we're headed for an explosive ending. Back at camp, our old pal Eagleflies arrives and says that the US Army has taken his tribe's horses. He asks Dutch's gang for help in getting them back so his people can hunt for food. Arthur and Charles are inclined to stay out of yet another mess with the US government, but for some reason, Dutch is determined to help. That night, they sneak aboard a ship carrying the horses, take out the guards, and hijack the controls. Unfortunately, Dutch has pretty much lost it, and he crashes the ship into some rocks. Arthur saves the horses from the river, and Dutch assures Eagleflies that his gang will help them defeat the US Army. Don't worry, guys! He has a plan! After this whole mess, the army starts withholding smallpox vaccines from sick natives who desperately need them.
Colonel Favors seems to think the natives have broken some promise they never made, and apparently he's punishing them by withholding vaccines sent down by the federal government.
Really?
Arthur is disgusted that the women and children are being forced to suffer for the decisions made by Dutch and men like him, so he agrees to help steal some vaccines back from the government. It seems that now that he knows his life is coming to an end, Arthur wants to do as much good as he can. With the help of a sympathetic soldier named Captain Monroe, Arthur snags the vaccines and brings them back to the tribe. After this, the gang gets word that Colm O'Driscoll has been arrested and is going to be hanged in Saint-Denis. Dutch and Arthur go disguised as policemen to watch the execution, along with Sadie, who is eager to see Colm swing after O'Driscoll's killed her husband. Once they get there, they see some O'Driscoll boys plotting to free their leader. Our gang thwarts them by taking some O'Driscolls hostage and threatening to kill them unless the rest of the boys let the hanging proceed as scheduled. Colm's life has finally ended, but Sadie still isn't satisfied. She kills the hostages and sparks a gunfight which they can barely escape from. And I know I've said that a lot, but narrowly escaping from shootouts is literally what 90% of this game is. That's two major enemies taken care of, and Dutch sets about preparing for one last job. Then, Eaglefly's father and chief of the Wapiti Indians, a man named Rainsfall, arrives at the camp with news of a potential peace treaty between the army and the tribe. Arthur and Charles agree to go along to try and keep the peace during a meeting with the army. As you can guess, the peace talks don't go very well. The one cool soldier, Captain Monroe, is arrested for treason. So, Arthur takes a soldier hostage and trades him for Monroe. Taking hostages is the other 10% of this game, by the way. Arthur and Charles escape with Monroe and put him on a train heading out of town.
Perhaps you could help somebody. Helping makes you really happy.
Even after this, apparently, relations between the army and the Wapiti still aren't bad enough for Dutch's liking. He convinces Eagleflies that it would be a great idea for them to attack an army patrol. They plan to use dynamite to knock down some trees, box the soldiers in, and then tar and feather them. A great prank, after which, presumably, everyone will laugh. Arthur continues to express his frustration with Dutch, telling him that the Wapiti tribe are good people that Dutch is manipulating for his own gain. Dutch denies this and says that the natives' situation is hopeless with or without his intervention. Well, he's not wrong there. Anyway, for some reason, the soldiers don't find this prank as funny as Dutch does, and they open fire. Dutch and Arthur are forced onto a cliffside and jump into a raging river below, foreshadowing Dutch's own eventual death.
You can't fight nature, Captain. You can't fight change. You can't fight gravity.
Man, if Dutch knew how sick Arthur was, he would not be making him do all this crazy stuff. Okay, well, yeah, he'd probably actually would. In all the commotion, Eagleflies got captured, so Arthur and Charles launch a rescue mission. While traveling there, Charles tells Arthur that he is too angry at how Dutch is exploiting the Wapiti. Arthur confides in his friend and tells Charles about his terminal illness. Charles responds by saying Arthur is lucky in a way, since knowing that death is coming will give him time to make amends. Anyway, they reach the fort where Eagleflies is being held, and you know the drill by now. A little sneaking, a little hostage taking, a lot of shooting, and explosions. Eventually, the two narrowly escape the fort with Eagleflies. Let's just call it even now, okay, US Army? Back at the camp, Sadie asks Arthur to help her finish off the last remnants of the O'Driscoll boys. Initially, Arthur declines, on account of the fact that he's dying slowly, but after enough persuasion, he gives in. In exchange, he asks Sadie to help John and his family leave the gang when the time is right. They travel to Hanging Dog Ranch, where the last of the O'Driscolls are hiding out. It's a long, bloody battle that ends with Sadie fatally stabbing the man who killed her husband. She reminisces on how peaceful her life was before all this, and how far she's fallen. Now, I'm certainly not saying the government is the good guy in all this, but you have to admit that getting rid of all these outlaw gangs once and for all was definitely a good thing in the long run. It's almost time for the final job, with just a few more preparations to make. First, Arthur and Bill have to hijack a wagon full of dynamite. During this, Arthur tries to convince Bill that Dutch has lost his mind, but Bill is loyal to his leader still. Next, Arthur and John are tasked with blowing up a bridge to disrupt the route of an army train. Meanwhile, Arthur tells John that he should just take his family and leave as soon as possible, and that loyalty to Dutch doesn't mean anything if it gets them all killed. Tensions between the Wapiti tribe and the army have finally reached their peak. Eagleflies comes into camp by asking for the gang's help attacking the army at an oil refinery. While Eagle is rallying the boys in the camp, his father arrives and begs his son not to throw away his life. But Eagle doesn't listen, so Dutch and his men ride out to help the tribe. At one point during this huge battle, Arthur is surrounded by soldiers and calls out to Dutch for help. But Dutch completely ignores him and leaves Arthur to die. Arthur is narrowly saved by Eagleflies, who takes a bullet in the stomach for his troubles. Arthur takes out the army's colonel in revenge, but there are ultimately no winners in this battle. Arthur then confronts Dutch about abandoning him, but Dutch just straight up denies it.
You ran away? Oh, I did no such thing. Don't be a fool.
Arthur then watches as Eagleflies dies in his father's arms, and at this point, his faith in Dutch is completely shattered. He's only hanging around to protect as many people in the camp as he can. On the way back, Arthur suffers another coughing fit and passes out again. He really doesn't have much time left. When Arthur finally gets back to camp, Uncle, Mr. Pearson, and Mary Beth have all left the gang. Good for them. Dutch then tells Arthur it's time for their last job. Arthur agrees to help, but only on the condition that Dutch lets John and his family leave the gang peacefully. Dutch is offended, but then he calms down and agrees to Arthur's offer. Arthur then meets up with John and tells him to leave with his family as soon as this job is over. John thanks Arthur for always looking out for him. Okay, we need a co-op game where you can play as both of these guys. Just two best buds taking on the world together. Anyway, Dutch's plan is to board the army train when it stops in Saint-Denis. One problem with that: when they get there, the train doesn't stop at all. The men all ride their horses hard, and for the last time in his life, Arthur jumps onto a moving train. He's still got it, folks. Arthur fights his way up the train with John, but then John takes a bullet in the shoulder and falls off the train. Dutch promises he'll go back for John while Arthur fights off all the soldiers pursuing them. The job is ultimately a success, but when Arthur meets back up with Dutch and Micah, they tell him that John didn't make it.
That patrol killed him. We had to run.
Come on, let's go, before another patrol turns up.
We know, of course, that that is a complete lie, and they didn't go back for John at all. But Arthur doesn't know that. He is deeply saddened to have just lost John when he was so close to getting free with his family. On their way back to camp, the gang runs into a panicking Karen, who is with little Jack. She tells them that Agent Milton just showed up at the camp and kidnapped Abigail. Micah tries convincing Dutch that she isn't worth rescuing, but Arthur isn't about to lose another Marston and let Jack become an orphan. He gives Tilly a sack of money, and then he and Sadie ride off on their own to save Abigail. Sadie notices how sick Arthur is and tells him to cover her with a sniper while she frees Abigail. Before long, though, Sadie is caught and taken hostage. Arthur has to fight his way through the Pinkertons until he reaches Agent Milton and the women.
We offered you a deal, Mr. Morgan. You should have taken it.
Then, Milton reveals to Arthur that it was not Molly at all, but rather Micah who had been informing on the group. Arthur and Milton wrestle over a gun, with Arthur losing the battle due to his fading strength. At the last second, Abigail frees herself and kills Milton. Ugh. These women have gone through hell. Arthur tells Sadie and Abigail to meet up with Jack and Tilly. He knows that his death is near, but before he goes, he needs to see his gang one last time. Arthur rides back to Beaver Hollow to find the remaining gang members packing up the camp. He tells Dutch that Micah is a traitor, which Micah strongly denies. Dutch can't seem to decide who to believe, when all of a sudden, John appears, wounded. John curses Dutch for leaving him to die. Guns are drawn, and Arthur tells everyone they need to choose a side now. Miss Grimshaw points a gun at Micah, John points a gun at Dutch, and Dutch points his guns at everyone. Javier announces that the Pinkertons are closing in, and Micah takes this opportunity to kill poor Susan Grimshaw.
He's lying. He's lying!
The remnants of the gang align themselves behind Dutch and Micah, but before they can do anything to John and Arthur, the Pinkertons ride in and everyone scatters. Arthur and John escape through some caves, and Arthur tells his friends to go meet up with his family before they leave. At this point, the player has a major decision to make. You can either stick with John and make sure he escapes, or go back to camp and try to retrieve the money from the robbery. I'm not sure what use a dying man has for a chest full of cash, so let's say we stick with our boy John. These two legends fight their way through a forest full of Pinkertons until Arthur has finally reached his limit. He tells John to go on alone, and John responds simply by telling Arthur that he considers him a brother.
I know.
Micah then jumps out and tackles Arthur to the ground. The two have a long, bloody brawl. Arthur crawls on the ground to try and grab a gun, but is stopped by Dutch stepping on his hand. Arthur tries one last time to convince Dutch that Micah is nothing but a rat, but it's not working. Arthur then tells his once beloved leader that he gave the gang everything he had. Micah tells Dutch that they can finally be free, but Arthur says that John is the only one of them who will ever truly be free.
We made it. We won.
John made it. He's the only one.
Dutch says nothing and just walks away, leaving both men behind. After this, if your honor meter is low, Micah shoots Arthur, killing him instantly. However, if your honor is high enough, Micah just walks away, leaving Arthur to watch one final sunrise before the illness takes him. Wow, what an ending! I say an ending and not the ending, because of course this game has not one, but 2 epilogue chapters where we are once more in control of John Marston. Here we go again. 8 years after RDR2 ends, John is attempting to lead an honest life to provide a living for his family. While working at a ranch, John is forced to fight back against a group of outlaws threatening his employer. After this, Abigail believes John will never truly escape his old life, so she leaves with Jack.
I had so many dreams, John. I hoped you would change.
Now, in order to convince Abigail that he's truly changed, John buys his own land with the intention of turning it into a ranch. He reunites with several former gang members, including Uncle, Sadie, and Charles. Uncle and Charles help John build his ranch, while Sadie, who is now a successful bounty hunter, helps him with money. When Abigail finally returns, John proposes to her. Eventually, Sadie learns of the location where Micah is now hiding out. Abigail begs John not to go after Micah, but he has to. John tells her that, if not for Arthur's sacrifice, John wouldn't even be alive. He then leaves with Sadie and Charles to avenge his fallen brother. After arriving at Micah's camp, John and Sadie confront the bastard. Dutch unexpectedly appears, having reunited with Micah to recover the money stashed after the Blackwater job. Micah then takes Sadie hostage and starts a standoff between the 3 men. Dutch is still pissed at John for not believing in him till the end, but in the end, Dutch shoots Micah for being the true traitor. Micah lets go of Sadie and tries to kill them all, but John manages to end Micah for good. John tries to thank Dutch, but he just ignores it and leaves without saying a word. What a drama queen! John then takes the money from the Blackwater job and uses it to fully pay off his loan. Later, John marries Abigail and they both look forward to living a new life on their ranch alongside Uncle and Jack. And we know just how that will end. If you reach 100% completion of the game, a bonus scene will play, showing John visiting Arthur's grave after getting his revenge on Micah. John looks at the grave and says, "I guess we're just about done, my friend." Well, he's done, but you're not, because you've still got plenty of adventures in your future. That brings us to the end of the entire story of Red Dead Redemption. We probably only covered about half of the total missions in the games. But like I said, if we covered every side mission and cool thing to discover, this video would never end. But what do you think of the stories in these games? Is it peak storytelling in video games or just overhyped? Which characters would you like to see return if they ever do a Red Dead 3? Leave a comment down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you next time, partner!